Good morning, everyone. My name is Sarah Marrero, and I am the coordinator of College Access Communications here at the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. I want to thank you all for joining us for this webinar for TN, specifically about our historically Black colleges and universities here in the state of Tennessee. I had the pleasure of being joined today with Dr. Brittany Mosby, and she's the director of HBCU Success at the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. So in this webinar today, we're going to talk about the past and stories about HBCUs, the rich history of HBCUs in the state of Tennessee, current achievements, things that are happening right now with our HBCUs, and then our visions for the future, which we're really excited about. So we can't wait to hear from Dr. Mosby about all those things. So I am going to just introduce her very quickly with a short bio about Dr. Mosby, and then we'll get started. So Dr. Brittany Mosby is the director of HBCU Success Programs and Initiatives at the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. And as director, Dr. Mosby develops policy, programming, and partnerships that foster student success, facilitate instructors' abilities to fulfill their missions, and further the state's higher education attainment goals. Prior to joining THEC, Dr. Mosby was a tenured associate professor of mathematics at Pellissippi State Community College. And in her 10 plus year career in higher education, she has championed access to a quality education and the pursuit of equitable post-secondary outcomes for all students. Dr. Mosby is a third generation Spelman College graduate, and she received a Master of Science in Mathematics from Carnegie Mellon University and a Doctor of Education in Higher Education Policy and Leadership as a Peabody Honors Scholar at Vanderbilt University. So Dr. Mosby, thanks so much for joining us, and we're excited about your presentation, so take it away.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to apologize in advance. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. So come along with me on this amazing journey about the history and the future of HBCUs in Tennessee. All right, so I like to start with a little bit of who I am and how I got here, and what motivates me in this work. So I like to go back to my great grandparents. This is Isidore and Minnie Mizell. In the 1900s, my great-great-grandfather built the first schoolhouse for African Americans in South Florida. They later went on to have 14 children and sent all 14 of their children to post-secondary. 12 of them graduated with bachelor's degrees, 2 had associate degrees at the time, all before the 1950s. And so this is where, for me, education was originally instilled as a basic foundation of a prosperous life. My grandmother then married my grandfather. This picture here, grandmother went to Spelman, an all-women's historically Black college in Atlanta, Georgia. My grandfather went to Morehouse, which is where they met and married. And they had 5 kids who they sent all to college. This is just a picture of my grandmother that I really love. She was a biology major. She later went on to work for the CDC in Atlanta before retiring to raise her kids, and she became a public school teacher to keep an eye on her 4 unruly boys, including my dad. So this one here, moving through time, my dad graduating from Tennessee Tech University here back in good old state of Tennessee, and this is my mom beside him, who also went to Tennessee Tech, and some of their best friends on graduation day. My dad again, so he would go on. He also graduated from UTK with a master's in engineering. And then there's me. So this is me giving the convocation address in high school. little old young me. And then my very first engagement after receiving my doctorate was to give the commencement address at Knoxville College. So came really full circle here in Tennessee, and that's a little bit about me and why I'm so passionate, not just about education, but for me, historically Black colleges and universities have really paved a way for my family, and I have been a rich beneficiary of these institutions. And so it is a great honor and a privilege today to share a little bit um, about the history. Alrighty, so we will go past, present, and then a little bit of the future. We'll do some dreaming and imagining because no story is complete without looking forward. So let's begin. Let's get right into it. HBCU origins. I will say questions, comments, thoughts, welcome. Please drop them in the chat. Sarah will be monitoring the chat, and we'll take some time at the end to answer questions that you may have, burning questions. But as you know, this will also be recorded for posterity. So please feel free to just sit back and relax and take this in. Gonna be fun, promise. All right, perhaps the briefest history of American higher education ever. First there was Jamestown, then there was Harvard. Actually, American higher education is a fascinating experiment. In the original Jamestown colony, founded in 1607, it actually had the highest concentration of college educated individuals, higher than any part of England or the old world at the time. If you can imagine, the folks who came over to the first colonies in America were often graduates of schools in England themselves. And so there were about 40 men with degrees within the Jamestown colony, which was unheard of concentration at the time. So it makes sense that one of the first orders of business for these colonies as they settled were to establish schools and universities. So Harvard College, as it was known, after their original donation from Reverend Harvard, was chartered in 1636. So just a few years after the settlement was founded, we have the first college in America chartered in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. It was an interesting foundation. It was supported both publicly and privately, blurring the line between public and private education in America, a trend that would follow for many decades, a trend where public investment in the higher education enterprise was unmatched, unique and new to American higher education as a whole. A little bit more about the history. So it is very different from European higher education. A lot of the old universities in Europe have religious foundings and were led by the clergy. American higher education was unique in that it was often led by lay boards and a unique stance on shared governance between administration, faculty, and students of the institution. And like I said, there's also a unique focus on the public benefit of education that the early Americans had. We've had several federal acts to support the establishment of higher education over time. The earliest ones actually came out of the first iteration of Congress, the Continental Congress, in 1785 and 1787. They gave money to establish public schools out west in the mid and west parts of the new fledgling country of America. Moving forward, we then had the Morrill Acts of 1862 and 1890, which further established land grants, funding, and resources for colleges with a specific agriculture focus. The GI Bill came in 1944, allowing veterans to attend higher education and to attain a degree for little to no cost. And then the Higher Education Act of 1965 was one of the broadest and most expansive acts to provide access to higher education. That's where we get the Pell Grant. That's where we get the funding for institutions and a variety of federal programs that still exist today to support higher education and more students and people in America obtaining degrees of higher education. Now we'll pivot a little bit here to talk about where HBCUs fit into this history. So we have a fledgling laboratory of education going on. The country is getting its legs underneath it as it's exploring democracy and freedom. Tangentially, perpendicularly, and contradictorily. Prior to the Civil War, it was illegal not only for enslaved persons to know how to read for them, it was also legal to teach an enslaved person to read throughout the southern United States. And across the North as well, African Americans were discouraged from attending education beyond what was basic to read, write, and to do their jobs. The first post-secondary degrees that African Americans obtained in the U.S. actually came from institutions in the North, such as Oberlin College in Ohio, was one of the first institutions to award a degree to an African American. So prior to the Civil War, what we have is a country that is building up institutions. UT Knoxville was founded in 1794, just to give you some context. So we have colleges popping up across to provide education to a population, but we still have a very disenfranchised group. We'll go forward to the era known as the Reconstruction era. So historians debate on when Reconstruction formally started, but we place it somewhere around 1861 to about 1877. Reconstruction represented a time where African Americans first had access to many of the civil unions and liberties and freedoms that they had been denied to. So during Reconstruction, we saw an explosion of not only churches, schools, and also African American engagement in public and civic life. Here in Tennessee, there were 13 African Americans elected to the Tennessee General Assembly between the years of 1865 and 1900, who were able to serve in the Tennessee legislature. This was also the time at the federal level where amendments to the Constitution were passed and ratified that secured basic civil liberties and freedoms, including the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment of Equal Protection Clauses, and the 15th Amendment, which provided the right to vote to African American men, but not yet to women. So at the federal level, we see a lot of intervention in the states in the South in order to enforce Reconstruction. And this view was broadly seen as the emancipationist vision for America, whereby African Americans immediately received full citizenship status and were free to create an American dream of their choosing. Unfortunately, in the South, there was a lot of conflict and tension, and it did not happen overnight as one could imagine. Tennessee in particular was the last state to join the Confederacy. And once the Civil War ended, it was the first state to rejoin the Union fully. So Tennessee has always been a border state. And as the first state to rejoin the Union, UT Knoxville became one of the first land grant colleges in the South to receive federal funding because one of the requirements to receive land grant funding was that your state had to be a part of the Union in order to receive that. So UT Knoxville has that unique claim to fame in that sense. The Reconstruction era, while we did see an explosion, there was in Tennessee the birth of our institutions, which also, oops, sorry, pop up over here. Our institutions in Tennessee began often as one-room schoolhouses where Students of all ages, adults, kids, were packed in, learning how to read, write, and arithmetic their way to education. Parents learned to read side by side with their children because, as you can imagine, they were recently freed from slavery, and so everyone was starting off at the same place. Over time, these schools separated into upper and lower divisions, and institutions emerged that we know today. So I'd like to go through how that happened in order, more or less, here in Tennessee. So let's see. There we go. Fisk University, one of the first Black colleges established in the South. And Fisk also has the distinction of being the first Black college to receive accreditation from SAC-COC. And that happened in 1930, to give you context. Fisk is named after the leader of the Freedmen's Bureau in Tennessee. His name was Clinton Fisk. So they named the school after him for African Americans. It was originally called the Fisk Free and Colored School. And it where it sits today, right over there off of I-40 in Nashville, its Jubilee Hall spire is one of the defining characteristics of the Nashville skyline, and it has been since its establishment in the early 19th century. Slightly prior to that, technically is Lemoyne-Owen. Lemoyne-Owen as an institution, as a school, first began in 1862. It would become a unified college later on in 1968. But Lemoyne-Owen is actually two separate junior colleges that merged together. So Lemoyne-Owen College was a junior college in Memphis. Owen College later opened, and then when they merged as a single institution, they became a four-year school. They are the only historically Black college in Memphis. And Memphis is the city in Tennessee with the Shelby County, sorry, not just Memphis, the greatest proportion of African Americans across the state. So Lemoyne-Owen has been a cornerstone of that mid-South corner of the state of Tennessee. Meharry Medical College was founded in 1876, and it actually started as a medical department of a broader school called Central Tennessee University. I'll get to that one in a second. But Meharry became its own separate institution as well. That happened in 1915. It chartered separately as a graduate college for medical training. And today it is the largest private medical institution for African Americans in the country, educating a vast majority of Black physicians and also dentists. It's got a school of dental health. And almost 80% of Black dentists graduated from Meharry. Knoxville College was founded in 1875. It is the only HBCU in East Tennessee as of today. Knoxville College is in a stone's throw distance of the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And if you know the Knoxville area, Knoxville College sits up on a hill. Knoxville College students actually built the school themselves while they were taking classes. And the unique claim to fame that Knoxville College has is it was the original land-grant institution for African Americans when the Morrill Act of 1890 was passed. So Knoxville College was in a partnership with UT Knoxville. UT Knoxville would send instructors to Knoxville College to teach the students there. And then Knoxville College would provide the faculty salaries and housing and lodging that the students could benefit from. That land grant status would later transfer to the university we now know as TSU, but Knoxville College was the first one tasked with providing that agricultural education for African Americans in Tennessee. This one here is an old historic view of Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee. Lane College was initially founded as the Lane Institute, founded to train preachers and scholars in West Tennessee. It would later change its name to Lane College when it added bachelor degree programs, and today has it's the largest private HBCU in Tennessee and has become the voice of Jackson, Tennessee, through its mass communication and radio programs run by the students there at the school. And then we've got American Baptist. So it was originally founded as the American Baptist Theological Seminary. This picture here shows a graduating class of students. And this building here, the library, is still standing today on its campus. American Baptist College is, you can see it on the banks of the river on the other side of Tennessee Titans practice facility downtown, if you are a Titans fan. I'll talk a little bit more about American Baptist's claim to fame as we move through history. And then finally, our public HBCU, our only public HBCU in Tennessee, and that is Tennessee State University. It was initially founded as a normal school, meaning it was a school to train teachers. It later took on the agricultural mission and became a state-supported school with that addition. And today is the largest HBCU in Tennessee and provides the majority of STEM graduates and sorry, lost my train of thought. The majority of graduates in STEM and underrepresented disciplines for African Americans in the state of Tennessee. So those are our 7 HBCUs that are still standing today that were founded during the Reconstruction era. In all cases, they were established by support from either religious groups, philanthropy groups, or in the case such as in Fisk, federal groups such as the Freedmen's Bureau that had vested interest in advancing African American education within the community. During this time, American society was still very much Victorian aligned. And so the American dream during this time consisted of getting a good education, getting a good job, and then being able to provide for your family. Very similar to what we know today. And so along these Victorian values, it was believed that the best way to integrate African Americans into American society was through a formal education. Now, if you are a scholar of American history, you'll know the Reconstruction era and the promise that it offered unfortunately ended. And with work yet left to be done. In 1876, there was a presidential election. Ulysses S. Grant declined to run for a 3rd term. That was possible back then. And with him stepping down from power, we saw a different kind of compromise between northern and southern states, which resulted in the federal government pulling troops out of its remaining stations in South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. And with that removal of federal military support, a lot of the programs that were established for African Americans fell as well. This would also see the founding of the Ku Klux Klan and other terrorist organizations that violently ended the Reconstruction era and in fact, turned a regression with Black codes, Jim Crow laws, and what would begin a new struggle for civil rights and recognition. However, despite the turmoil that marked the end of the Reconstruction era, the remaining and the enduring symbol of hope for African Americans that has endured to this day have been the schools that were established during this time. On the other hand, there are some institutions that were formed during Reconstruction and the time antebellum history that are no longer in operation today. So we'll take a moment to remember these schools that were established that educated hundreds of students and then today are no longer in operation. In no particular order, Swift Memorial College, alternately called Swift College, was a school in Rogersville, Tennessee, that was established. It closed shortly after integration efforts began in 1950 with declining enrollment and students having choice to attend other institutions. But a marker remains in the community where it once stood, and it's a community center, open um, um, to all and open for events and community gatherings. Central Tennessee College, which would later become Walden University, is the original home of Meharry Medical College. So Meharry started as the medical department of Central Tennessee. Central Tennessee was facing competition from the expanding market in Nashville. It would become Walden University in an attempt to diversify its programs, but it eventually closed. Walden University is the former site and the current site of Trevecca Nazarene University today. So where Trevecca sits is the former site of Walden University. And so that site still works, educating students under a different banner, under a different name, but still a place of education and access here in the Nashville community. Roger Williams University, fascinating history here. It originally stood where Peabody College, Vanderbilt, currently stands. Roger Williams University is named after the founder of Rhode Island, who was the philanthropist that gave money to establish that institution. The area, that Hillsborough area, if you're familiar with Nashville, was once occupied predominantly by African Americans, but as it became a more desirable piece of real estate, Roger Williams University actually burned down twice. Both cases are attributed to arson, and it was a common tactic of the time to burn down institutions and buildings to clear out way for progress for those who wanted to expand their territory. After the second time the school was destroyed by fire, the faculty would move to what was at the time known as Lemoyne College, later joined with Lemoyne Owen. So the faculty of Roger Williams went to Memphis. The students of Roger Williams would become the student class of what is now known American Baptist College, and the land itself was turned over to George Peabody, where he established his college for teachers, and it is now a part of Vanderbilt University. If you go to Vanderbilt Peabody's campus, the Wyatt Rotunda building, on the side of the steps, there's a historical marker in remembrance of Roger Williams University that used to stand in that very spot, founded to educate African Americans there in the Hillsborough area of Nashville, Tennessee. And the last one, according to my records, is Morristown College in Morristown, Tennessee, East Tennessee. This school was established again by local philanthropy and dollars for for children of Appalachia up there in East Tennessee. It also faced financial difficulty over time, and it would merge with Knoxville College in an attempt to continue its educational mission. So it became the Morristown campus of Knoxville College. Unfortunately, Knoxville College would find itself also in financial trouble in 1997. And so as they sought to reorganize themselves, Morristown College, its campus was closed. Morristown, Tennessee still has a historical marker where the site of the university, or the site of the college, used to be, and that community gathers for an annual recognition of Morristown as well. These are the schools that we know about that are no longer in operation, but it's important to remember that during this time, opportunities were cropping up everywhere, and it didn't take much to be a school. All you needed was a willing individual to be a teacher and a willing individual to be a student. And so we suspect that there might have been tens, 20s of other schools across the state of Tennessee that operated and existed for African Americans, and over time merged or became high schools or lower division schools. But this is what we know about those schools that were offering post-secondary education to African Americans across the state. Now, focusing on and moving forward in Tennessee in history, we come to the fight for civil rights. So the Reconstruction era ended late 19th century, moving into the 20th century. The fight for civil rights began in the earliest 1900s, but what we know and what we classically refer to as the civil rights era begins around the 1950s on to the 1960s. Tennessee has a unique place in the history in that it is not only the birthplace, but the growth place for many heroes of the civil rights era. So our Nashville institutions have a special claim to fame. American Baptist and Fisk University in particular have served not only as training grounds, but Diane Nash, who received the Presidential Medal of Honor, graduated from Fisk. John Lewis graduated from Fisk. C.T. Vivian and John Lewis both attended American Baptist. It was theological seminary at the time. In order to hone and solidify their strategy for nonviolent protest for civil rights. And in fact, in East Tennessee, the Highland Center served as a national training center for all civil rights. The Montgomery bus boycott sent their participants to the Highland Center to train on nonviolence before that bus boycott started, and it became a common destination. So although the Highland Center is not a college or university located out in East Tennessee up in the mountains, not far from where I was born and raised in Oak Ridge, the Highland Center was a vital part of the training for civil rights as well. So in addition to providing the reading, the writing, and the arithmetic for Black African American citizens in Tennessee, these colleges and universities also provided the foundations of what an equal life would look like for African Americans. It was on the college campuses that students got together, sat in the grass, and dreamed about how to get from point A to point B in a racially just society. And that's what we mean when we refer to the rich history of HBCUs and the transformational nature of HBCUs. Students who attended these schools were going not just for the transactional nature of obtaining a degree, but to better themselves in multiple dimensions, in civic engagement, in their critical thinking, and their ability for compassion and their ability to understand complex theories of thought and ideas of freedom and philosophy. HBCUs are the birthplace of what became African American scholarship for the entire nation. And Tennessee was a crown jewel during that time. So after the 60s, there are now colleges and universities across the country, but they did not have a recognition or a designation. So beginning in the 1980s, with students fresh from their protests, there was the Black student, so there was the Civil Rights Movement. Sorry, let me back up a little bit. The Civil Rights Movement, followed by the Black student movement of the 70s. During this time, Black students began to attend non-HBCUs and protest for Black-centered curriculum at those institutions. So the Black student movement, founded at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, was a time where Black students um, sought to take what they experienced at their HBCUs and implement it at non-HBCUs, implement that same curriculum and culture of learning about African Americans at non-HBCUs. So fascinatingly, we saw a lot of universities celebrate the 50th anniversary of their African American Studies department because it was during 1968 and student protests that a lot of universities formed Black Studies, African American Studies, those area studies as a result of student protests during that time. Following the Black student movement, students turned their attention back to these universities, which at the time, again, didn't have a name. In 1980, a big personality, radio personality, his name was Tony Brown, organized the Black College Day 1980. Imagine it was like a march on Washington, but all college students. Their goal was to just raise awareness and support for what they consider, what they called Black colleges. And these didn't have a official definition, but it was the schools that were founded for or by Black folks. The activism and the advocacy of this day happened to coincide with a election cycle, i.e., it was, I believe, Jimmy Carter at the time. And here we have the first coinage of the term historically Black college and slash or university. It was first established by an executive order in 1980, later ratified by Congress. In 1986, Congress amended slash reauthorized the Higher Education Act of 1965, and that is where we formally got the definition for HBCUs and also some federal funding mechanisms for those institutions. So while it is true that an HBCU is any institution that was founded prior to 1965 with the express purpose of educating African Americans, it wasn't until 1986 that we got that designation, that recognition, and that set aside from the federal government. So the struggle for HBCUs has been one that has been fascinatingly led by students, propelled by students. You can see over time that student activism and advocacy has been a major driver in advancing HBCUs and their place in the higher education enterprise in America. So following this recognition from the feds, we now have a group of schools that have been recognized as contributing significantly to the education of the American populace and also contributing significantly to the socioeconomic mobility of traditionally marginalized groups of people. So we are beginning to see this is a turning point for HBCUs in terms of their collective impact and their collective their collective impact and their students and how they've gone on to affect other areas, not just of education, but other areas of American life. So moving forward through time, one of our last stops on the past, which will bring us to today. So today there are just over 100. Counting depends on what you qualify as accredited or not, or authorized, or what have you. So accounting for all definitions of what a college or university is, there are just over 100 historically Black colleges and universities that are recognized by the federal government today. 19 states and 1 U.S. territory. Sorry, that's a typo there. The U.S. territory is the Virgin Islands. The U.S. Virgin Islands, the University of the Virgin Islands is also a historically Black college. slash university, and the only one not on mainland United States. Again, owing to the unique history of being founded by, well-meaning philanthropists and communities, the majority of HBCUs still in existence today are private colleges. Over half, 54, are private, and 3 of those are graduate-only institutions, including Meharry is one such example of a private HBCU that only has graduate programs. The others, there's about 51 public universities and colleges. About 12 of those are 2-year institutions, and 21 are designated as a land-grant institution, which we know from recent news and headlines. A land-grant institution is an institution that is designated and set aside by the federal government to receive funding for its agricultural and extension research and activities. Every state has a land-grant institution. States in the South have 2, one called the 1862 land grant for us in Tennessee. That's the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And then the 1890 land grant, which for us is Tennessee State University. Real quick, let me just give you the difference between the 2. The Morrill Act of 1862 was initially passed. You'll notice 1862 before the end of the Civil War. It allowed any state currently in the Union to receive a land grant to establish a university. States could only take advantage of the land grant funds in 1862 if they were, as I said, part of the Union, and if they did not bar admission based on race. Later, after the Civil War, after Reconstruction, they passed a second version of the Morrill Act, known as 1890, which said, okay, if your state does bar race or does bar admission on the basis of race, then you have to open a separate school, designate a separate school that African Americans can attend. And so these 19 states that do have African-American land-grant institutions are known as the 1890 schools, and that's why Southern states have 2 land-grant institutions, and thus all of the current discourse around disparate funding between states that have 2 land-grant institutions. But I'll talk more about that as we move forward through time. So speaking of forward through time, HBCUs now. I say now-ish. So I'll begin with when I started. So that would be 2018 or so. We began to see, beginning especially 2019 and going into 2020, a resurgence, a re-interest, and a renaissance, if you will, of interest in historically Black colleges and universities across the country. So not only were there reports about the socioeconomic mobility provided by HBCUs, but we also saw philanthropists such as Mackenzie Scott donating millions to these institutions in order to provide scholarships and greater access for students in order to attend. Today, HBCUs enroll over 300,000 students, and as I said, across the 19 states in that one outlying territory. By the numbers, HBCUs are about 5% of the total education higher ed space. So all the universities, all the colleges across the country, HBCUs represent about 5% of that, but they graduate about 20% of African Americans with a bachelor's degree. So still providing an outsized impact in terms of moving students across the finish line, especially when compared to their inputs, their outputs far exceed that trend line. But what we've also benefited from during this renaissance and with the proliferation of social media and 24 hours news cycles and instant and continual access is that we have seen Black culture really taking taking note and lifting up and advocating for HBCUs as well. So a few of my favorite HBCU moments. I'm a huge Beyonce fan, so her performance at Coachella was if you haven't seen it on Netflix, I highly recommend it. But an amazing display and tribute to HBCUs and their musical traditions. Coach Deion Sanders, prime time, made a huge splash when he decided to coach football for Jackson State University in Jackson, Mississippi. He then made headlines when he left. But during that time, he led the college through a tremendous season and exposed not only student athletes to their options at HBCUs, but also brought a lot of recognition to athletes already attending HBCUs. Moving on around, I've got a picture here of one of my favorite U.S. Congresswomen, Congressman Representative Alma Adams. She is the leader of the Congressional HBCU Caucus, and through her efforts, she has passed several HBCU-related bills in Congress over the past few years, including most recently the HBCU Future Act, and she was also instrumental during COVID in the CARES Act in making sure HBCUs received adequate and equitable funding to provide for their students that were disproportionately affected by the COVID pandemic. One of my most favorite pictures of all, the year after I graduated from Spelman, Michelle Obama was the commencement speaker. I missed her by a year, but this is Michelle Obama being conferred an honorary Spelman bachelor's degree. I love this picture because what she's literally saying at this moment is, I always wanted to be a Spelman woman. Same girl, me too. And then finally, probably one of the most prolific HBCU graduates from Tennessee State University, the Oprah Winfrey, who started right here in Nashville, Tennessee. This is a photo from her speaking at TSU's graduation last year to bring it back full circle. So we have seen an incredible cultural renaissance, recognition, coming back home, if you will, to HBCUs over the years. And right here in Tennessee, we've been able to capitalize on the unique moment that we've had through time to add to the HBCU discourse. Oh, first, let me give you some fast facts. Building on 180 years plus of education excellence, here are some numbers, and I think I'm getting close to time. So this presentation, of course, will be available for you, and I am happy to share any of these numbers as well because they're just great to have in your back pocket to talk about HBCUs. As I mentioned before, more than 20% of Black college graduates will receive their degree from an HBCU. During the 20th century, so for someone like me who was born in the 1900s, the vast majority of African Americans in the middle class graduated from an HBCU, including at one time about 40% of Black members of Congress, 50% of Black lawyers, and 80% of Black judges seated during the 1990s graduated from an HBCU. Still true today that over half of public K-12 teachers earned a degree from an HBCU, either their bachelor's or master's. The average graduation rate for an HBCU is right around 60%. This number is a little old, but it's important to note that is higher than the national average for students at non-HBCUs. So again, looking at the unique cultural aspect that HBCUs provide for Black students, it's not that they're just going to get their general education, but they're also getting that civic, that engagement that pushes them to persistence, matriculation, and completion. I got to give one more shout out to my alma mater, Spelman College. So Spelman is an all-women's school. Bennett College, also an all-women's historically Black university located in North Carolina. These two schools contribute over half of the entire nation's Black women who earn doctorates in all science fields. And if you look at the equivalent, the Ivy League Seven Sisters, more than them combined. Just a little bragging point that I like to throw in there myself. A few more STEM degrees in particular um, do amazing, or STEM majors do amazingly well at HBCUs. Not only am I a third generation HBCU graduate, I'm also a third generation STEM nerd. My grandfather was a math major. My grandmother was a biology major. My dad, engineering. Me, I majored in math. Uh, all thanks to HBCUs. And 9 out of the top 10 colleges that graduate the majority of Black students who go on to earn their PhDs are HBCUs. And then finally, this one's a thinker. Take a minute to wrap your head around it. If we look at all of the HBCUs, which again, only about 5% of higher ed in this country, half of the nation's HBCUs have a freshman class where 75% or more are Pell eligible, i.e. from low income backgrounds. On the other hand, only 1% of non-HBCU colleges serve as high a percentage of low-income students. So when we talk about that engine of socioeconomic mobility, this is what we mean. HBCUs are still today providing unprecedented access, and access that hasn't been met by non-HBCUs by a long shot. All right, so to really get into the meat of the present, and then to begin to talk about the future, here in Tennessee, we've got HBCU success. So why am I so happy to wake up every morning and go to work? Because Tennessee is the first and still the only state to have a full-time position in its higher education agency that is dedicated to ensuring the success of all of its HBCUs across, again, the entire higher education enterprise. I work with HBCUs that are public. I work with HBCUs that are private, some that are accredited, some that are not accredited, and provide all of them access and support to state resources. So this is the current look at our HBCUs across the state. Again, we've got 7 that are currently in operation. Tennessee State University are public, the rest are private. And then Meharry Medical College, our unique gem being a medical school with only graduate degree programs available. So my work today in the present and moving into the future, again, is to make sure that our HBCUs are able to provide the highest quality education, building on their rich foundation, but also increasing opportunities for the institutions themselves to participate in and benefit from any state programs that may be available out there, or as the need requires, creating state programs to support our drive to 55, increasing the number of Tennesseans with a post-secondary credential, trademark for THEC, is our mission and our goal, not only at THEC, but also as a part of the HBCU Success Initiative. I've got a timeline here to give you a brief look at some of the milestones in our office. I'll focus on one. In 2020, February of 2020, I was able to get all 7 presidents in the same room to discuss the future of HBCUs. In March, COVID happened. Now, I'm not saying correlation and causation, but I did gather them all for the first time, and then we all went home for a very long time. I have not tried to gather all 7 HBCU presidents again. A little nervous to see what happens, but it was a historic moment for us there in the Capitol to have all of the institutions coming together collectively. We are working off a strategic plan, 3-point plan to promote HBCUs, to support HBCUs, and to encourage partnerships with HBCUs. I work within my office at THEC, and I also have a success advisory board made up of folks from across the state who help me carry out this important work. A little bit about my day-to-day job, what kinds of things that I'm doing to support HBCUs. Lives in 3 buckets: research, developing programs, and bringing people together for convenings. One of the ways that we've raised support that you have immediate access to right now on College for 10, the front porch to higher education, here at the agency, you can now search specifically for HBCUs to begin the college planning journey and learn more about the schools here in Tennessee. We have also, since the inception of the HBCU office, been having days on the Hill, again, where we bring together all 7 institutions to collectively advocate for their students. So we've had legislators, we've had agency and department heads, and of course we've had students attend each of our days on the Hill, and we're looking forward to this year's event, which promises to be even bigger than all of the other years combined. I would be remiss if I didn't stick in a quick plug for an event that's upcoming. 2 weeks from now, on Thursday, February 29th, we will be having a great event. It is going to be a session where we look to see what does the digital future of technology, or digital technology future of HBCUs look like? What do they need? And how can we help them achieve those goals? And we're looking at the full spectrum of digital access. And that is all the way from broadband access to AI implementation. We want to hear it all. All are invited to attend. Please spread that news with your networks. I've got a few slides here, just looking at what we have in store in hope for the future. And really, it's designing the future with HBCUs in mind. So past, present, future, what's remained constant about HBCUs and the values they provide? They are the definition of student success. And we are looking to increase academic readiness through summer bridge programs, access to higher education through outreach, and a focus on completion for students who enroll. One of our focuses at the Commission, family prosperity, making sure that HBCUs remain affordable through robust financial aid, scholarships and programs, a transparency in their operations, and of course, an outreach to students, including adult students, to obtain their degrees, and then the future workforce of tomorrow, today, by creating not only a diverse workforce, but a workforce that is prepared for what the future of work looks like, both technical and leadership, soft skills wise. Our HBCUs are involved in all of that. So our central key to HBCU success has been and is a willingness to try often, learn quickly, ability to discern and adapt to the changing needs of students, employers, and the economy, holding on to traditions, but also creating new ones to ensure future sustainability. I think we're going to end here. I want to thank you so much for the time today. It is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I hope you've gotten a glimpse into the rich heritage, but also promise that these futures continue to hold for their students and the communities where they live. If you have not, please check out our website. You can get to it from the TCAT website by adding on HBCU-success. And I will end here and see if we've got any questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dr. Mosby. Yeah, we have one question here. Do any HBCUs have 2+2 programs with community colleges in the state?
Yes, actually some do. And Dr. Tracy Comer and I are working to have even more by the end of the year. So off the top of my head, I can't tell you exactly which programs are 2+2, but yes, we are actually, I've got an email in my inbox right now, develop more 2+2 programs. And we really want to make them as seamless as possible too. As Stephen said, no more asterisks on our TTPs.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing
Yes.
that. That's really exciting. I don't see any more questions in our chat right now, but we really appreciate the time that you've taken to shed some light on those things. I know that I, for one, learned a lot, and it's always so interesting to learn more about things that are happening, you know, as Nashville grows, and a lot of us are in the city a lot, and to know that there's such rich history, just like you said, even, you know,
in our backyard,
play and practice, you know, that there's so many things around. So thank you so much for sharing all that with us, Dr. Dr. Mosby. And
Thank you
thanks
so much
everybody
for
for
that.
joining us today. We're going to have this recording up on collegefortn.org, so we'd encourage you all to check it out there and to share this if you'd like to as well. But thank you so much, everyone, and we hope that you have a great Friday.